And we welcome you to another Temple Beth Torah lunchtime learning program with Greg Philipson. I'm told this is a very, very full program. We've got just a couple more people who are logging in, and we'll give it just another minute to let everybody log in, but we're delighted. Most of you have seen Greg's presentations before. He's one of the most knowledgeable, informative, and entertaining collectors that all of Texas, Austin, and perhaps the whole Western Hemisphere. But we always enjoy his presentations. He's got a particular historic interest in things that happened during the time of the Holocaust. And today's program is about a maritime history. And the naval presentation, you see it up here on your screen. We are recording today. Please mute yourself unless you have a specific question. And you can also chat questions in. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Greg.
Well, thank you very much. And maybe we'll just give a little brief introduction about what this is. So many people don't or have limited information about what happened during the Holocaust. And I don't want to get this confused with ships after, like after the war and immigration to Palestine, to America and other countries after the war, the the blockade ships and so on, like the Exodus. That's not what this is going to talk about. So I hope you find it interesting. And like with all my presentations, I really do these so somebody has a new perspective and learns something new. What you're looking at here are ships from our collection. These are little die-cast models, to scale models. And the smallest one you see there is probably less than 3 inches long. And I just put those on there. These are the ships that some of the ships that we're going to be talking about. But to begin, I'd like to introduce you to Albert Balin. And Albert Balin, it's very important because this man, although he was born, well prior to the Holocaust in 1857, he was a fully assimilated German Jew who revolutionized transatlantic shipping, both from a cargo as well as a passenger standpoint. And he worked and became the managing director of the Hamburg America line, one of the main shipping lines. There was the Hamburg South America line and other ones as well. But he really took this to a whole new level. And many of the ships that we're going to talk about today are actually part of the work that Albert Balin had put together early on in his career. Now, he was a very, very important man. And as you can see in this photo here, this is a 1914 photograph of him with Kaiser Wilhelm II. And that was at the launching of the Bismarck in 1914, just prior to the start of World War I. So this is way early. But this guy was so connected, even to the Kaiser, a very, very important man. And to the point that well, let me just show you this. This is in virtually everything you see here today are items, a few of the hundreds and hundreds of items we have in this particular collection. So this is a map of, or a blueprint, if you will, of the Albert Balin ship that was launched in 1923. And sadly, Albert Balin, at the end of the First World War in 1918, the Kaiser was going to abdicate his shipping line that he had spent his entire life developing and promoting. He was literally a diehard German. He saw that the Allies were going to nationalize these ships, and his business was gone. His relationship with the Kaiser had gone to heck, and he actually, through a series of too many sleeping pills, he committed suicide in 1918. But they named the ship after him in 1923. And you can see this is a little stamp. It's enlarged so you can read it good. But these are some of the Hamburg America line. That's their logo in the center. It says the Albert Ballon, the Deutschland, the Hamburg, the New York, and so on. And a photograph, you see just a whole bunch of people that were on the cruise ship. And I'm not sure where that was docked at that particular time. Ballon has such a reputation of so much important work done in Germany with the shipping industry, with Maritime, that for his 100th birthday, the German post office came out with a stamp honoring him. And you can see this is a first day cover that even the postmark that they created in 1957, celebrating his 100th birthday, was issued. Now, in addition to just what he did for shipping, on the left, this is a postcard that shows the Ballon House, and on the left is Ballenstadt, if you will. And Ballenstadt was a Hamburg, Germany, where all this went down, was basically the point of demarcation for most people emigrating from Europe, not just Germany, and coming to America. And he wanted to make it comfortable because a lot of people didn't have a lot of money, many immigrants. So he created Ballenstadt, which was a section of 30 buildings with comfortable accommodations for people to stay as they were waiting, being processed, and of course, prior to boarding their ships. And the Ballon House on the left, that's kind of like for, although it was incoming, Ellis Island in New York was for incoming immigrants. This was more of a place for emigration from Germany and Europe. Just for fun, these are a few of the many things we have. These are authentic authentic artifacts, not replicas, directly off the ship. These are a couple of ashtrays. One is a cigarette, it's like a little ashtray itself. The other one is a cigar cutter. Kind of fun little things, you know, very cool Maritime cup and saucer. What I wanted to show you here, and what starts to tie this to the Holocaust, is that Albert Ballon, albeit an assimilated Jew, was a really, really prominent German. And in 1935, 2 years after the Nazis took over, of course, they could not have a ship named after a Jewish man. So they, of course, changed it to the Hansa. And what you see here is a postcard from our collection that shows basically the Albert Ballon renamed, and the postcard showing that it is the Hansa. And this is again, a real photo, a press photo from our collection of the Hansa. You can see the name clearly on the front. But what's very important here is this message on the back. Now, this is 1938. This happens to be 12 months and almost 30 days prior to World War II starting. It says the Hamburg America liner Hansa, scheduled to sail at midnight on the 28th, left New York at 9 a.m. as Germany recalled her vessels at sea in the threatening war crisis. The Hansa sailed with none of the 350 passengers who had booked for the voyage on board. So they recalled their ships all over the world to bring them back. Most likely at this time was to start outfitting these ships more for naval action instead of military naval action. And this is a real nice couple of items here. Two different covers. You can see postmarked on the Hansa, and one actually has the letter with it as well from 1938. And what's really important here is Albert Ballon. Some of you may remember or recall from one of my earlier presentations on the Holocaust, their Ewige Jude, and you see that on it's a large blown up, it's not a postage stamp, it's a poster stamp of Albert Ballon. It's showing, trying to counteract the Nazi propaganda against the Jews. You know, what you're seeing on the right-hand side is a postmark that says their Ewige Jude. It's the Eternal Jew. It was a really vicious anti-Semitic movie. And there's a book about it from our collection on the right, on the bottom. And what you're seeing here is a Jewish caricature holding gold with a whip, and of course the communist symbol on the outline map of Germany. And there was a woman named, a Christian woman named Irene Herring, and she did a whole bunch of these labels about famous German Jewish people that were showing, look at, this is the contributions that Jews have made to the great country of Germany, she's telling them. And it obviously fell on deaf ears. The anti-Semitism in Germany was so deep rooted. But it is interesting that even during the 1930s, his image appears on one of these Herring labels, along with many other Jewish people. Here's a few other interesting items from the ship: a pocket knife, a little sewing kit, that's it, complete on the right, and a notepad with its original pencil. A little bell, and I just forgot what you call that when you sew. But anyway, it's a cool little item. And these are really nice. You can see the one on the top right. That is so rare. That's one of the very few items you'll see from the Hansa. And that's a comb case. There's a plastic type comb in that little fold over package there. A wooden cigarette box, actually maybe more for makeup. It's got a mirror inside. And of course, that beautiful hand-stitched hanky on the left. Now, I want to talk about Robert Lye moving forward. And we'll talk more about Albert Balin because there's some interesting theories with him in this too. But Robert Lye was one of the top Nazis. And he was in charge of two different programs, we'll call them. One was the Deutsches Arbeitsfront, the Labor Front. And they controlled the labor all throughout Germany, whether it was civilian or slave labor and what have you. And part of that was an organization known as KDF, and it stands for Kraft durch Freude, and translates to a strength through joy. This was a propaganda program for German civilians where they tried to control every aspect of their life. And we're going to talk about these cruises, ship cruises that were part of the Kraft der Freude program. But the Volkswagen was part of the KDF program. There were concerts and plays and almost anything you can imagine to entertain German Nazi party members throughout Germany during the 1930s, prior to the war starting. And this is a rather interesting image of, they went by Dr. Lye, and the original frame from Germany that came in. Now this is, these are both from our collection. One is a photograph on the bottom of a Kraft der Freude office, and there's no way for me to know what city that's from. It wasn't marked on the back. And you can see it says Die Deutsche Arbeitsfront on the top, and then Kraft der Freude. This was like a tour office, a travel guide office where people would go and sign up for the tours or plays, and these were located in cities all around. What you see on the top right there is a little label, if you will, like a stamp of Robert Lye. It's pretty rare. Now, the top left are a group of people. It looks like they're coming off of a cruise, but all happy little Nazi party members. And this one was from Bremen, and it's a Kraft der Freude group tour. So this is the kinds of things the Nazis were doing to keep their own people completely under their thumb, but offering them a lot of fun things to do. And of course, and I think in Robert Lye, it was 1936, they created this ship, they built this ship, and you can see the Labor Front's logo on the smokestack there. It's kind of a gear with a Nazi symbol, if you will. And that's an original postcard, and just mailed. I wanted to show you how gorgeous these ships were. These were created specifically for this program, but I truly believe that they were created also to be turned into naval vessels for the German Kriegsmarine, if you will. That also has a neat little label affixed to the front there with the Nazi logo on it. And this one has an interesting cancel. It was called the KDF Electro Shift, the Freude Robert Lai, and magnificent boats. And this particular one has the postmark that it was posted on the ship. And you can see on that little round cancel, it says Deutsches Schiffspost or Ship Post Office. These were produced, we have this one, they were little. This particular one is small. We have larger ones for other ships, but it's a small photo album from the Robert Lai, and it's just filled with all the pictures these people would take on their little cruises. And this is a framed piece I bought as part of a whole collection. You can see the kind of gear swastika on the smokestack a little better there. And a photograph from the woman who owned this album. I've just inserted it into the front of the picture frame there. And they would go on cruises to friendly ports. Of course, many places didn't want Nazi ships there, even in the 1930s. But this one went to, let's see, this is part of the Canary Islands, the Spanish Canary Islands off the coast of Africa. It's a censored piece of mail, but what I really liked about it, you can see the postmark on there. Again, Deutsches Schiffspost, and it has both the Deutsches Arbeitsfront and the Kraft der Freude name inside that postmark, if you will. And this is what people would do. The Spanish government at that time was censoring the mail going back to Germany. It was being sent to Bremen. And other things that are interesting, another card, but this one I wanted to make a couple of points about. So this now is Feldpost. Feldpost is military mail. So as our suspicions were confirmed that these ships were turned into military ships, naval vessels, this is from a sailor that was on the Robert Lai, and they must have found postcards that were left over from when it was a tour ship. And this is, of course, the little swimming pool or a hot tub, and you see all the cute little, obviously not military related artwork on the walls, kind of a little seascape of fun animals, if you will. This is a censored piece of mail by the purple circle there. And notice that it's from Pillau, which was up in the Baltic area. So now you have people using this, it's a naval ship, and they're finding these little consumer postcards, if you will, on there and using them to send back to their own homes. And this is a piece of mail, Feldpost again, but it's really interesting because the other one, let me go back one, this is from 1941. So obviously the war is already going on, but now we're getting October of 44 and the war is not going well for Germany. And these guys, these ships are all up in the Baltic area. You can see this one says Memel, which is in Lithuania. And it writes, I translated this, he says, I'm no longer in Memel. We got replaced in Memel. After one day and one night out at sea, we've already been in on shore in Pillau. Now that's the same place where he's at now, that 1941, the ship was also docked for 2 days. He says our accommodations are on the KDF ship, the Robert Lai. And this is going to be very important because Operation Hannibal that we'll talk about, which started around January of 1945, the Russians were coming heavy into Lithuania, Latvia, the whole Baltic area. And the Germans had colonized that. It was called Lebensraum, or living space. And they were now having to evacuate all of their people shortly after, you see, this is from October of 44, utilizing all these naval ships to bring their people back to Germany. This is an extremely rare item right off the Robert Lai ship while it was a Nazi ship. It's a camera that the passengers, this is again when it was a cruise ship, not a naval vessel, they were able to borrow this and take their pictures to fill the albums, like what we saw earlier, that little photo album. Now, the kind of the good news, and I want to just preface this, this is a Holocaust presentation that actually has some pretty interesting positive stuff in it, which it's really, really hard. You have to search very deep to be able to use positive in any manner with the Holocaust. But here's one of the positive things. He got caught in 1945, you can see the Americans caught him, and they caught him in his pajamas. And he actually hung himself in 1945 in his jail cell. Sadly, they didn't hang him, but that's part of the good Holocaust story, if you will. Now, many of you have heard about the SS St. Louis. That's we have a little bit of family stuff involved with this, but the St. Louis, if you're not familiar with the story, it's a Hamburg America Line ship, part of the Albert Balen story and so on, that was turned away from many ports, from Cuba, the United States, Canada, and other places, and a really tragic event. In 1939, the St. Louis sailed from Hamburg, where it was stationed, to Havana, Cuba. It carried 937 passengers, almost exclusively Jewish refugees. The Cuban government refused to allow the ship to land, and the United States and Canada were also unwilling to admit the passengers. They were finally permitted to land in Western Europe, but prior to the Nazis, taking the Low Countries and France. But 254 St. Louis passengers ended up dying in the Holocaust. It was scrapped in 1952. This particular postcard, although it's pre-Holocaust, it's 1930. I really love it because for my collection, because I'm originally from Utica, New York, and here's somebody using the St. Louis Ships Post, sending that to Utica, New York in April of 1930. And you get an idea of how large these ships were with the image on the front. This is like the Balen. This is a very, very hard to find silk hanky from the St. Louis. And I really like this postcard, although it shows the St. Louis and the Cap Arcona, which is, this is the Cap Arcona, but it was mailed from the St. Louis, as you can see on those postmarks. And the Cap Arcona, we're going to talk about in some specific detail here. So it's showing the Cap Arcona, another one of the cruise ships. That's from the Hamburg South America Line. And look at these postmarks on here. MS stands for motor ship, or the motor ship, the St. Louis and the Hamburg America Line. One is the Nazi symbol, one is the symbol for the very rare postmarks to find on a card. Keep the Cap Arcona in mind. This is a Krafter-Freude. You can see this right from the St. Louis. Just a kind of a fun postcard. He's waking people up, doing the morning call on the St. Louis. This is 1935, right in the midst of the Holocaust era. And again, another postcard giving an idea of the size of the ship. Also with the Krafter-Freude, Deutsches Arbeitsfront cancellation, and also many of these things were censored. Now, this is another original photo, a wire photo or press photo from our collection. Take a look. There's a bunch of people. These are Jewish refugees, and many of them were wealthy. Leaving Germany, they had money to book fare on the St. Louis as it was trying to escape what was going on in Europe at the time. But look at the note on the back here. Reunion in Havana ends in tears. And I might add that my father-in-law, Avshalom, Joseph Warwick, he and his family he as a boy, managed to get out of Poland through an uncle in Pennsylvania. And they actually had visas, whether they were legal or not. They appeared to be legal at the time. They spent 5 years in Cuba, and that's how they survived the Holocaust. But it says the German, and he saw the St. Louis leave Havana Harbor, by the way. The German Jew kissing his sweetheart left is one of the 917 refugees aboard the St. Louis, and their tearful parting came when the Cuban government ordered the ship out of Havana Harbor on 3 June without letting any of the refugees off. And it's a very, very sad testament, but here it is in black and white, a real photo with the real pasted on text that would have been sent out to all the newspapers by the Associated Press. The Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., they have a tremendous amount of material on the St. Louis. This is one of the books that they published we have in our collection. And of course, many of you know The Voyage of the Damned, a movie, I believe, from the 1970s with an all-star cast, Faye Dunaway, James Mason, Lee Grant, and so on, all about the plight of the SS St. Louis. Now, I want to get into something very important here. This is David Frankfurter, and this is an original newspaper from our collection. It says, Jewish medical student who shot Wilhelm Gustloff at Davos, Switzerland on February 4th. He surrendered to police, declaring he had planned the murder to retaliate for the suffering of Jews in Germany. He is 26 years old. This is the Holocaust story, my favorite Holocaust story. So who does he assassinate? He assassinates the Gauleiter, or the governor, if you will, the leader of the Nazi party in Switzerland. And this guy was a pretty heavy-duty Nazi. I mean, you can imagine their presence in Switzerland. Frankfurter, if I could give you just a little bit of info, he was born in 1909 in what was then Croatia, Slovenia, kind of Austria-Hungary area. And he was born to a fairly to-do family, and he was a medical student, and things were really not going well for him, right? So he goes to Davos, Switzerland, knocks on the door of Gustloff's home. Mrs. Gustloff answers the door, and he goes, "Is Wilhelm zu Hause?" She goes, "Yeah." So she brings him into the library or whatever room he was in, goes in there and shoots the guy several times. Drops dead right there in the room. He surrenders to the Swiss police and goes to prison. Now, the great news is the war ends. Frankfurter gets exiled from Switzerland, goes to what was then Palestine, and ends up working. Now, I just read this. After his release from prison in 1945, he had to leave Switzerland, traveled to the British Mandate of Palestine. Frankfurter settled in Tel Aviv. He later became an employee of the Israeli Ministry of Defense and later an officer in the IDF. He lived and worked in several Israeli cities until his death until 1982. A real Jewish hero. So he whacks this guy, and now again, they're going to turn him into a martyr. So, what is it? Tomorrow is Kristallnacht, the anniversary, I believe. I think it was on the 9th and 10th of November. And of course, that was Herschel Greenspan assassinating Ernst von Roth, who was a guy that worked in the embassy in Paris, Nazi embassy in Paris before the war. And of course, they martyred him, and they used him as the catalyst for Kristallnacht. Well, of course, this is 1936, 2 years prior, when Frankfurter assassinates Wilhelm Gustloff, but still they made him into a big to-do martyr as well. And they name a bridge. This is a very rare item from our collection. This was handed out to dignitaries at this bridge here that they named after him. Look at that, big to do. And this is a real photo postcard from our collection of the Gustav Brücke. So that's it. And 1937, when they did that, and they had a camp, a kids camp for Wilhelm Gustloff as well. You can see that's postmark on that one is from 1942. So they're naming all these things after him. And of course, in 1936, just like they did with the Robert Bly a year later, they created the Wilhelm Gustloff. That's a to scale model of the Wilhelm Gustloff cruise ship. Again, and this has some really, really interesting stuff with it. So this is the captain. Luby, I think is how you pronounce his name. And just a real photo postcard I have in the collection of him at the helm of the Wilhelm Gustloff. This is a large photo album that when it was being used as a cruise ship by the Nazis, people would fill these up with all their, you would buy that little thing on board and you would fill it up with all your photographs. This has a lot of great photos in it, but we don't have time for all of that. What is interesting is this particular album, of the many we have, has that badge. It's a pin. It's like a brooch. It has a pin on the back. And that is for the Mediterranean cruise of Kraft der Freude, KDF, in 1938 and 39. And in 1891, we're going to go back to Albert Balin. He created and developed the first Mediterranean cruise for German vessels so many years earlier. And here is the Kraft der Freude, Nazi propaganda organization, now taking their ships to the Mediterranean, just as Albert Balin had done and created so many years earlier in 1891. And I thought you might enjoy this. I added these this morning. You can see these cancellations. These are different ships. This one is the Oceana, another one of the KDF ships. It was an older cruise ship, but you can see that it says a Mediterranean cruise is what that says across the middle there in German. So this is what's going on. And again, tied right back to Albert Balin from so many years earlier. These are two little trinket boxes, if you will. I call them pill boxes. It's made out of wood. And there's two different ones here, both off the Wilhelm Gustloff, and very, very seldom seen. You see the Deutsches Arbeitsfront gear logo there. And of course, it says Kraft der Freude. And again, 1938-39, like you saw on the postmarks and on that pin stuck onto the photo album. However, over time, the Gustloff got sucked into naval service as well. And at one time, it was housed up in the Baltic, up in the Prussia area, used to house as kind of like a giant barracks, if you will, to house their people that were being trained, the sailors being trained for submarine service. And then, of course, it was also used as a hospital ship, as you see here with that particular postmark. And this photo was with that particular piece of mail. Now, Gustloff, when he was assassinated, he was from Schwerin, Germany. And it's outside of Hamburg, it's Mecklenburg, and so on. It's a fairly large area. And this is his funeral, and you see his casket on the caisson there. This is like a huge dignitary funeral. What I'd like to really have you pay attention to is the civilians on the left, all involved in doing the Heil Hitler salute. And these people weren't required to go. They wanted to be there. He was from this Schwerin area. And you can see on the back there, it says military escort. This was big news. And it says Nazi leader who was slain in Davos by David Frankfurter, Jewish medical student. And again, it's always incredible to have these kinds of original photographs. You can see the date 1936, just shortly after he was assassinated. Now, this is a remarkable, remarkable photograph we have. And this is a note that is from this guy, Christian Bergman, a guy in Germany that I had done some business with. And it says, "Greetings, Herr Philipson. The content is true and the photo is from my family. The girl and the boy, you see them on the left-hand side there? She has her hands in the pocket. And the little boy with the cap on are members of my family. The photo is from that time and was privately owned by our family. By that, I mean in 1936 and the burial of Gustloff in Schwerin, where we live. More or another similar photos do not exist. Greetings from Schwerin, Christian Bergman." Imagine this. See the guy in the center? You see that actually looks like Robert Lai or Julius Streicher off to the left of center. But the guy in the center, well, we're going to go back to him. So these are a couple of not real photos. He sent me copies. The two kids you see there, the girl in the little swimming suit and the boy in the shorts in the front, it says girl in photo and the boy in photo. These are taken in 1934. That's his aunt and uncle. And that's who's there at the Wilhelm Gustloff funeral. That's the guy's father, or his grandfather, the guy that wrote me, Christian's grandfather, sitting there with the dog and his little, happy Austrian hunting hat there. I want to go back here and talk about this, the guy in the center here. I just put blank on his name. I'm sorry. It is Friedrich Hildebrand. Boy, I took me a second to find my note. Lucky I made a note on that. Anyway, he was a really, really top Nazi, and he was the Gauleiter, just like Gustloff was the Gauleiter of Switzerland. He was the Gauleiter for Schwerin, Mecklenburg, and Hamburg, that whole area there, really high-level Nazi guy. And he was captured after the war and tried and executed in 1948 for it wasn't at Nuremberg. There was another series of trials called the Dachau trials. And they tried a lot of these Nazi war criminals, not just for mass murder of Jews and crimes against humanity, but he was the thing that really nailed his tuchus was he had executed, I think it was 47 US airmen that were captured, and they executed them instead of putting them in as prisoners of war. So the good news, another great story along with Wilhelm Gustloff, is that this guy was whacked as well. Now, going back, this is a stamp of the Wilhelm Gustloff, the one on the top left. Now, this was a series of ship stamps of which the Gustloff was also included. It's called a semi-postal. You see it says 6+4, so it'd be 6+4 pfennigs. They were designed as part of the postage that you would pay would go to the Winter Relief Fund. And you see that word in German next to the 4. So these are like charities. Part of it's postage, part of it goes to the Winter Relief Fund for the German troops, the Nazi troops. But what's most important, not only does it have the Gustloff stamp, look at the postmark on it. It's postmark in Munich, and it says there, Ewige Jude, the big political show. And again, this is the same one that appeared on the Albert Balin label way earlier in the presentation of them advertising, even on the mail, but it's tied onto that stamp. It's really a beautiful piece of philatelic or stamp collecting history, as well as the Ewige Jude and Wilhelm Gustloff. Now, the Gustloff story just keeps getting better. So we got Gustloff's dead. Frankfurter, we know, goes on and has an incredible, wonderful life. And so let's talk about the ship, the Wilhelm Gustloff. Operation Hannibal. They're sending all these ships, the Robert Lye and some others we'll talk about in a few minutes, including the Gustloff, up to get these people all out of harm's way. Civilians, military, you name it. It was just packing these people on. So the Gustloff departs from up in the Baltic with over 10,000 people on board, just trying to get them back to Germany before the Soviet onslaught. Soviet submarine C-13 is waiting in the waters, and it fires a couple of torpedoes at the ship and sinks the Wilhelm Gustloff. This is the commander, Alexander Marinesco. This is a statue of him in Russia and a stamp honoring this sub-commander. Over 10,000 Nazis went down in one fell swoop, courtesy of Marinesco. And this is such a huge thing that you see stamps and so many different things. I can't tell you how many books are published about the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff. It's incredible, and the kind of material we have on this. But this particular stamp shows the Gustloff along with, in English, a C is an S, so that's why you see the S-13, but in Russian, it's C. And so here's another one. This is the Gustloff in the center there. These are, I don't consider it a tragedy. I think it was a great thing. but a lot of people, this is talking about maritime tragedies. And of course, the Gustloff, with the largest loss of life, I think 3 or 4 times the loss of life than the Titanic, there in the center stab from Madagascar. And here's a fairly rare book we have. It's in Russian, talking about the exploits of the C-13 submarine and Marinesko himself. One of the things I wanted to talk about with Marinesko was that he was born in 1913. He died in 1963. But it wasn't until 1993 that he was given the Hero of the Soviet Union medal. That's like the Congressional Medal or the President's medal here in America. He was actually I can't think of the word. He was actually looked down upon because he was drunk so often that the hierarchy in the Russian Navy, the Soviet Navy, really didn't care too much for him. But he sunk the Gustloff with 10,000 dead, and also the SS von Steuben, which took out about another 3,000 Nazis during Operation Hannibal. And I just wanted to show you a couple of other things about the man who shot the Nazi Gauleiter, a little newspaper article as he's being released from prison in Switzerland, and a book that was published in France, the Frankfurter Affair. There's an awful lot of information out there on this, but this particular publication is extremely hard to find. So Marinesko also sank the von Steuben we talked about, and you can see the von Steuben up in, again, this is Operation Hannibal. This is this one is taken in 1939. They've already camouflaged the ship for naval activity. So this is right after or shortly before the war started. And I don't own this photo. This, I think, is from the US Holocaust Museum's website. I borrowed this to give you an idea of the von Steuben there up in Pillau. We looked at that postmark on 2 different things earlier up in the presentation up in Prussia there. You can see it's Baltisek in Russia today. But this is what it looked like in that cold, brutal weather with these ships docked trying to get these Soviet colonized people out of harm's way. This is it was a different cruise line. It was the Norddeutscher, the North German Lloyd Bremen line, picture of what the von Steuben was. And you can see that's a ship's postmark as well. What's really interesting is von Steuben was a Revolutionary War hero here in America. And he actually went back to Germany after the American Revolution and was a general both here and there. Interesting that that his name was involved. Now this, as we wind down the presentation here, these are 2 ships from the initial slide. This is the Cap Arcona and the Thielbeck. The Thielbeck in front there was more or less a little transport ship, a cargo ship, as you can see. The Cap Arcona was part of the German South America line, went back and forth to Argentina, Buenos Aires, and the like. Now, this is a really, really horrific story. So as we go in here, I just want to show you a couple of pieces of mail. This is as the Holocaust is just getting underway. Somebody was on the Cap Arcona, and you can see the postmark there in 1933. And a couple of pieces of mail. This one was one from somebody on the Cap Arcona. They were on there in Argentina, and it was being sent to Copenhagen, Denmark, a piece of registered mail. So this ship was being utilized. This one is in 1938. So this is well into the Holocaust era. These are still being used as cruise ships, if you will. They have not yet been taken into service for the German military. Some very rare pieces, artifacts right off of the Cap Arcona, an ashtray, a little flower vase. This is an extremely rare item. This is a postcard of the Cap Arcona. And what you see is cut out there is a little flap that opens up on the front of the postcard, and all of these little photographs drop out like an accordion. And this is the back of the card. You can see that's dated 1938. And an extremely, I've never ever seen anything like this. This is about a 2-foot high doll from the Cap Arcona. And that's what's called the cap tally, the little black band around the sailor's cap, if you will. That's straight off of the Cap Arcona. Incredible, incredible Holocaust related artifact. And some different, paperwork from the Cap Arcona and so on. This is a working flashlight from the Cap Arcona. My neighbor had the bulb that worked in there, and I popped a couple of C batteries in there, cleaned off the spring, and it works perfectly. An aluminum cigarette case, unbelievable. And of course, something I put this particular one in because it's got, you see where it says Lübecker Bach, that's Lübeck Bay. And it's very, very important to remember Lübeck Bay as we talk about the Cap Arcona. This is a Cap Arcona Nazi Sailors album. It's from Roderick Wagner. And I bought this from somebody in Germany. He served on the Cap Arcona, and that is his original cap tally. And it's just loaded with stuff, including pictures of him on the Cap Arcona as a sailor. And you can see a postcard here in Gotthaven. This is where all these ships sailed out of. You can see the turbine ship, Cap Arcona, on the bottom there. And again, this is Feldpost from 1941, so early in the war, as this was already taken into naval custody. These, when we had some students from the University of Texas come and look at this, this is a sold book or a pay book. This was really important. This one's for the Nazi Navy, as you can see on the bottom there. This is that guy Wagner's own thing. This was all part of the collection. And in here, you see this is his identification. And he was in the submarine service. That's a U. The red bars there, you can't see. You'll see it on the next page. Those are 2 bars with the bottom part, the semicircle, you'll see on the next page because it bled through. But that means he was in the Unterboot, a submarine, an underwater boat. So this is some really, really rare stuff. And when I speak to the one of the groups, it's a subgroup, of the history department at the University of Texas, the Normandy Scholars Program. Some of the kids were so excited to come to the house, and when they saw this, they wanted to start doing research on this and so on. This is really, really hard to find stuff. And what I did here was I scanned a couple of pages from the sold book that shows he actually was, what you can see when he was on the Cap Arcona. So this is a little model I have of a British Royal Air Force Hawker Typhoon light bomber. And the tragedy is here, we're going to talk now about something not very pleasant to speak of. This is a real picture of the field back. You saw my little model. So what I want to tell you is that back in the spring of 1945, everything was collapsing for the Nazis. There was a concentration camp. There was a lot of deaths there, south and east of Hamburg, called Neuengamme. And there were thousands of prisoners, and about 9,000, almost exclusively Jewish inmates of that camp, were force marched out to Hamburg, which I think may have been about, I'm not sure, it could have been as many as 50 miles. And then from Hamburg, remember we talked a little bit about Lübeck Bay, they force marched them to Lübeck Bay. And many, many of the prisoners, died en route. The ones that weren't able to make the trip were slaughtered at the camp prior to, the rest leaving. But it was really a tragic thing. They loaded these people onto the Cap Arcona, about 5,000 on the Cap Arcona, and about 2,000, if you can imagine, 2,000 people, Jewish inmates or prisoners, concentration camp prisoners onto this little ship called the Fielbeck. So what were they going to do? They were going to scuttle these ships. They were going to sink these ships in the waters off of Lubeck Bay and drown all the inmates to kind of hide their dastardly deeds, if you would. There was another ship called the Deutschland that was there. That had a lot of Nazis on it, more so than these were almost all inmates. But the decks were loaded with SS guards in their uniforms, easily identifiable. And there's so much written about what I'm going to tell you. There's so much controversy. It's one of these conspiracy theory stories that nobody will probably ever know the answer to. I've researched and can't find it. The British Typhoon Hawkers came through and literally strafed and bombed all three ships. The Deutschland, which had almost no inmates on it, that capsized and sank with not a single, all the Nazis were able to be picked up and brought to shore. However, the Cap Arcona, 5,000 dead, I think there was 300 people may have survived it, and almost nobody off the Fielbeck. And the tragedy in addition, so imagine surviving the forced march, surviving the strafing and the bombing of your ship, surviving not drowning, and you found your way to shore only to be mowed down by SS machine gun emplacements all along the beach. So this is, to me, one of the most horrific, probably the horrific maritime story of the Holocaust. If you're interested in reading something about this, there's a lot published, but Pivnik's book, he's actually the survivor, Auschwitz, as well as the Death March and his fight for freedom off the Cap Arcona. So very interesting story, tragic in every sense of the word. Interestingly, with the Deutschland, a little bit prior, you'll see this. These are two pieces of mail sent from Germany via the SS Deutschland in Cuxhaven Harbor, and they're sent to Washington, D.C., Foreign Service of the United States. I have two different ones. You see the swastika in the postmark or the Nazi eagle on the top one. And notice that these were sent with a seal. So, basically knowing that diplomatic mail, that it wasn't opened. And these are pretty hard to find, kind of things like this, but it's interesting that during this period, these ships were even being used to take diplomatic mail back to America. Just on the other hand, there was also, the USSR had another submarine called the L3. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry if we have a Russian speaker. Later you can fill me in. But this guy sunk the Goya, which was another Soviet, a Nazi ship. The NV Goya was another one of these KDF ships, and the L-13 sank that with quite a significant loss of life on that one as well. The Goya appears with the Soviet submarine on a stamp, also from Maldives. And this is a model we have in our collection of that series of Soviet submarines. Boy, they did some real havoc up in the Baltic without question. Now to wrap up here, my father-in-law and his family, they managed to find their way in the middle part of 1939 out of Zavakhos, Poland, found their way to Le Havre, France, and sailed on the Flander from Le Havre to Havana. And there they spent 5 years. And as I mentioned earlier, they witnessed the St. Louis being turned back at Havana Harbor. This is a beautiful little box that contains a very hard to find French line coin of the Flanders, the ship. It's probably the only artifact we have from from that particular ship that took my my in-laws' family to a safe haven in Cuba. And he never forgot the Cuban people. When he became an apartment complex manager in New Jersey, he he hired a lot of Cuban people, and he was serving. He spoke Spanish, Polish, Hebrew, English, just remarkable. And this is a picture of the family in Havana, Cuba. That's Michelle's grandparents and her aunts and uncles, and they're all gone now. Actually, two of them passed away. Two of her uncles in the during the pandemic, sadly. But that's the Warwick family in Havana, Cuba. And this is a little blurb that her Aunt Rita, of a Shalom, that she wrote in her memoirs about the trip on the Flanders. As you can imagine, they were in very basically steerage, if you will. They weren't any first, second, or third class accommodations, and it was an old ship at that time. So it says, when we arrived in Havana Harbor, it was beastly hot. We weren't used to such heat. After disembarking, we sat for hours at the wharf waiting for Mom and Edith, her sister, to make arrangements needed to be made to get us settled, and so on. It's just a remarkable exploit to have something in the family of that. And this is the Warwicks 5 years later when they arrived in New York. A tremendous story, and again, one of the stories of the Holocaust that has a semi-happy ending here, that they survived, but much of the family did not. So with that, I say thank you. I hope that perhaps there's so much detail to this. I tried to do it quickly to stay within the hour. And if you have or need more information on any of this, I'm always delighted to help. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and answer any questions that anyone might have.
If you have a question, you can either put it in the chat or unmute yourself. But what a delightful, informative. I had never heard of David Frankfurter. That whole story was all news to me. Anyone have any comments or questions for Greg?
Well, I have one for the group besides the rabbi. Did anybody learn anything new?
Yes.
Good. All right, then I consider it a successful talk.
Greg, can you talk about, and I'm forgetting the details of the Titanic, not the Holocaust Titanic story of a ship that was called the Titanic or nicknamed the Titanic?
Yeah, well, that's the Cap Arcona.
Oh, that's the Cap Arcona. Okay.
Yeah. So that story, the Nazis actually created a movie, there's a movie called The Nazi Titanic. You could look that up, but that is in essence the Cap Arcona. You're right, Hi.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an awful story. I so prefer telling the story A to Z about Wilhelm Gustloff, because where do you have a chance to see 10,000 Nazis go down in the icy waters of the Baltic there in one fell swoop, and another few thousand go right behind them on the von Steuben. So and Frankfurter survived the Holocaust. He goes on and becomes such a productive member of Israeli society. It's a kind of a win-win on every aspect. Minna, were you able to get the rest of the story there? Minna, you're muted. Everybody, this is my cousin Minna from New York.
Found it, of course, so interesting because this is a period that I personally did not know much about. The war started and that's where the action took place. But look what was going on 10 and more years before. Thank you ever so much.
You're welcome, Minna.
The question came in about, are you familiar with the vessels that brought a few hundred Jews to the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, not so much about the vessels, but I know the story because I have a small collection on that. What is it? Trujillo? I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Unfortunately, that never really materialized. There was a couple of interesting stories like that in the Philippines, in the Dominican Republic, and so on. But I'd have to go research. I mean, there's obviously so many ships, but I never focused on the maritime aspect of that. But that's a great story. If people don't know about that, that's worth looking into. I'm looking at the chat to see, how do you preserve your collection of documents? So anyway, everything that, you know, we have, you can't see them, it's facing the wrong way, but we have hundreds of binders. Everything is in acid-free sleeves. If it's mounted, it's on acid-free paper, no lignin, and so on, all archival type material, and including the large portfolios and what have you. You know, they're stored, everything's, if it's near the floor, it's on things that we had custom built to elevate it off the floor, even upstairs, and just, God forbid there's any water happens to come. And we do our best as you can, you know, with heat and air conditioning and that sort of thing. We do the best we can. It's not probably, we really don't get too many complaints from museum curators when they visit all the time, but you know, they've got a lot better resources and facilities and employees to manage all that.
Another question came up about, have you considered doing a traveling exhibit to different Holocaust museums in different cities?
Yeah, I don't know. I've you know, we deal with, we're exhibiting at the United States Holocaust Museum right now and have been for quite a while with their Americans in the Holocaust exhibit. It's a powerful, powerful exhibit. If you have, it's just ushmm.com or .org, either one works, I think. You should take a look at that. It's really very interesting about what was happening in America from all aspects. But it's hard to put together a traveling exhibit. You know, I'm not a curator, I'm a collector. And although we know how to archive stuff and so on here, and I try to write it up best I can, I really rely on the museums. So if there's a museum that wants to develop that, certainly our material is all available. But you just saw such a tiny piece of what we have in the collection of artifacts, not just nail in the vases and things, but tremendous number of documents and things like that from this particular period regarding the maritime aspect of the Holocaust. You could put together a fantastic exhibit without batting an eye. All the materials here.
So you've certainly put a lot of energy into getting such a wide collection, but also your knowledge and your talent in presenting it. Thank you so much, Greg. This is brought to you by Temple Beth Torah. Greg is volunteering his time, but we have lots of things that we have an opportunity to sponsor at the temple, and so we're always appreciative of any donations that come in to Temple Beth Torah to help us keep up with these kind of programs, as well as our regular Shabbat, our religious school, and all the other wonderful things we do for our small little community in Humble, Texas. We're delighted to be able to keep going, and with your help, we'll keep going for a lot longer.
And Rabbi, thank you for your kind words, and I really enjoyed being invited to participate in the baseball, that poster thing. That was really a lovely event that you guys did. So thank you for that. And I also wanted to say hello to my dear friend Cy Wellner, who's on here. I have the thing, I can't see everybody, but
yeah, I think Cy might have signed off already. But,
oh, okay. I just saw something in the chat. Darn it. Okay.
But he did say that spending an afternoon with you and me together was a highlight of his day. So
oh, good.
Simon is a past president of Temple Beth Torah, who has who comes to our Zoom programs periodically from Austin. I'm going to turn the recording off now, and thank you once again to everybody for coming.
All right.